The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. In the year 2147, those dreams became real. Humanity had built ships that could travel faster than light. They had reached out into the galaxy, eager to find others like themselves. They found the Valorian Galactic Empire. The Valorians had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire spread across 3,000 star systems. They had seen countless species rise and fall. To them, humanity was just another young race, small, weak, and unimportant. But the Valorians noticed something strange about the humans. They grew too fast. They learned too quickly. In just 200 years, humanity had gone from simple rockets to starships. The Imperial Council watched this progress with growing worry. Ambassador Kethvoran arrived on Earth on a cold morning in March. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black glass. He stood before the United Nations and delivered his message in a voice that held no warmth. The Valorian Empire offers humanity a choice, he said. You will become a vassal species. You will surrender all military technology. You will accept limits on your population. You will serve the Empire faithfully. The human leaders listened in shock. The American president stood up slowly. And if we refuse? She asked. Ambassador Kethvoran tilted his head. His black eyes showed nothing. Then you will be corrected, he said simply. As all dangerous species are corrected. Humanity refused. The United Nations voted unanimously. No nation would bow to alien masters. No people would accept chains. The human leaders believed the Valorians were bluffing. Surely no civilization would destroy an entire species over wounded pride. They were wrong. The Valorian Third Fleet arrived in the solar system 3 days later. 100 massive warships appeared near Jupiter, their hulls gleaming like silver knives against the black of space. They did not respond to any messages. They did not negotiate. They simply moved toward Earth, with cold purpose. Fleet Admiral Elena Vasquez watched them come. She stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance, hidden in the rings of Saturn. Her ship was one of humanity's finest, but against the Valorian fleet, it was nothing. A toy against giants. Admiral, her first officer said quietly. They're entering Earth orbit. Vasquez said nothing. She watched the tactical display with eyes that had grown hard over 30 years of military service. She had a daughter on Earth. Maria was 7 years old. She wanted to be a starship captain, just like her mother. The bombardment began at noon, Greenwich Mean Time. The Valorian ships carried antimatter weapons bombs that turned matter itself into pure, destructive energy. They fell on Earth like rain from an angry god. New York vanished in a flash of white light. Beijing followed. Moscow, Mumbai, London, Tokyo. One by one, every major city on Earth was erased from existence. The attacks continued for 6 hours. When they finally stopped, Earth was silent. 7 billion human beings were dead. The blue and green planet that humanity had called home for 200,000 years was now a ball of glass and ash, still glowing from the fires that had consumed it. Admiral Vasquez watched it all. She stood perfectly still on her bridge, her hands gripped behind her back. Tears ran down her face, but she did not make a sound. Around her, crew members wept openly. Some fell to their knees. Others screamed in rage and grief. When the last Valorian ship finally turned away from Earth, Vasquez spoke. Her voice was quiet, but every person on the bridge heard her clearly. Never forgive, she said. Never forget. The Empire believed humanity was finished. Their records listed the species as functionally extinct. Medals were given to the commanders. Celebrations were held on the Valorian homeworld. Grand Admiral Searthax, who had led the Third Fleet, was elevated to the Imperial Inner Circle. He gave speeches about the successful correction of a dangerous young species. But the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had ignored the outer colonies. 18 million humans survived. On Mars, in domed cities beneath the red dust. On Europa, in bases that floated above a frozen ocean. On Titan, in the asteroid belt. Scattered across the outer solar system, humanity still lived. They were broken. They were traumatized. They had watched their homeworld die from millions of miles away. But they were alive. And they were very, very angry. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a bunker complex carved into Olympus Mons, the surviving human leaders gathered. President Marcus Chen sat at the head of a long table. His face was hollow. His eyes were red from crying. Around him sat the remaining generals, admirals, and government officials, all that was left of human civilization. Admiral Vasquez entered last. She walked slowly to her seat, her uniform still perfect, her face now a mask of stone. "We've completed our assessment," she said without greeting. 18,400,000 survivors across all colonies. We have 47 military vessels that escaped destruction. Limited resources. Limited manufacturing capacity. President Chen looked at her with empty eyes. "Can we win?" he asked. "If we fight them, can we win?" The room fell silent. Every person there knew the answer. The Valorian Empire had thousands of warships, billions of soldiers, technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. A war against them was not just difficult, it was impossible. Admiral Vasquez met the president's gaze. "No," she said. "We cannot win. Not in any traditional sense." "Then what do we do?" someone asked. "Do we hide? Do we run? Do we beg for mercy?" Vasquez shook her head slowly. A strange light had entered her eyes, something cold and patient and terrifying. "No," she said again. "We do none of those things. We cannot win, but we can make them remember us forever. We can make them pay for every single life they took. We can make them afraid." She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to something almost like a whisper. "We can make them afraid of the dark." President Chen stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Tell me what you need," he said. Admiral Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Time," she said. "Give me 10 years. Give me every resource we have. Give me your anger, your grief, your hatred, and I will give you something in return." "What?" Vasquez looked around the table at the broken remnants of human leadership. "Extinction," she said quietly. "Not ours, theirs." And so, in a bunker, beneath an alien world, with the ashes of Earth still cooling in the void of space, humanity began to plan its revenge. The galaxy had taught humanity a lesson about power. Humanity was about to teach a lesson of its own. 10 years passed in silence. The Valorian Empire celebrated its victory and moved on. The human correction became a footnote in their long history, just another dangerous species that had been dealt with. Schools taught children about the importance of removing threats early. Military academies studied the operation as an example of efficiency. Grand Admiral Searthax wrote a book about his victory. It sold millions of copies. The humans, they believed, were gone. They were wrong. In the cold darkness of the outer solar system, humanity was not dying. It was transforming. Like a caterpillar becoming something with wings and claws, the survivors were changing into something new. Something dangerous. Admiral Elena Vasquez had named her plan Operation Extinction. Not humanity's extinction, the Empire's. It was an impossible goal. Everyone knew it was impossible. And everyone worked toward it anyway, because the alternative was to accept what had happened. The alternative was to let 7 billion deaths mean nothing. Humanity refused to accept that. The first years were the hardest. Resources were limited. Food was scarce. The grief was overwhelming. Many survivors wanted to die. Some did, but slowly, painfully. The colonies began to recover. And as they recovered, they focused every ounce of energy on a single purpose: revenge. Children born after the burning of Earth were raised on stories. They learned about blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched to the horizon. They learned about their grandparents, their cousins, their entire families who had burned in the bombardment. They learned to hate the Valorians with a cold, patient hatred that burned in their hearts like a pilot light, small but never going out. Every child was trained for war from the age of 5. Mathematics, science, combat, strategy. Nothing was wasted. No talent was ignored. Humanity could not afford to lose a single capable mind or body. And in secret laboratories scattered across the outer planets, human scientists worked miracles. They had captured Valorian technology during the brief conflict before Earth's destruction. Small things, communication devices, scanner equipment, pieces of armor. Human engineers took these things apart, atom by atom. They learned how they worked, then they made them better. Dr. Sarah Kim led the weapons research team. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and steady hands. She had lost her entire family on Earth. Husband, 3 children, 8 grandchildren. Now she worked 20 hours a day, every day, driven by a grief that would never heal. The Valorians are advanced, she told Admiral Vasquez during one progress meeting. But they are also lazy. They stopped innovating 10,000 years ago. They have the same weapons, the same ships, the same technology they had when they first conquered the galaxy. She smiled a thin, cold smile. We improve every day. By the 5th year, humanity had developed the Ghost Drive. It was an FTL engine that left no detectable signature, no energy trace, no gravitational wave, nothing. A ship with a Ghost Drive could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. It could strike and vanish before the enemy knew what had happened. By the 7th year, they had the Prometheus warheads. These were not bombs in any traditional sense. They were weaponized, artificial stars, small packages that could ignite nuclear fusion in any matter they touched. Drop one on a planet, and the planet became a sun. Drop one on a fleet, and the fleet became fire. By the 9th year, they had the Reaper drones. These were self-replicating machines designed for one purpose: to kill. Release them on a world, and they would consume its resources to build more of themselves, each new drone hunting and killing until nothing living remained. And in the deepest laboratory, locked behind 100 security doors, Dr. Kim worked on something else. Something called the Lazarus Protocol. Even Admiral Vasquez did not know the full details. She only knew that it was humanity's final weapon, the last resort, if all else failed. But weapons were only part of Operation Extinction. In the 8th year, the infiltrators began to leave. Humans, who had been surgically modified to look like Valorian client species. The conquered races who served the Empire as slaves and servants. These infiltrators spread throughout the galaxy, taking positions as servants, workers, and translators. They mapped Valorian defenses. They studied their enemies. They made friends with other conquered species and whispered poison in their ears. The Valorians are not gods, they said. They can be hurt. They can be killed. And one day, they will pay for what they have done. Seeds of rebellion were planted in 100 worlds. They would bloom when the time was right. On Mars, the shipyards worked without rest. New vessels rose from the red dust, sleek and deadly, built for one purpose. They had no comfort, no luxury, no unnecessary space. Every inch was devoted to weapons and armor and speed. These were not ships for exploration or trade. These were ships for war. The population grew too. Human scientists had perfected cloning technology and artificial wombs. New humans were born every day, not naturally. But in laboratory tanks, their growth accelerated. Their minds filled with knowledge and skills through direct neural programming. By the 10th year, humanity's population had grown from 18 million to over 200 million. Every single one of them was a soldier. Admiral Vasquez herself had changed. She no longer cried. She no longer showed emotion of any kind. Her officers whispered that she had become something more than human. Or perhaps something less. She spent her days planning, training, and preparing. She spent her nights staring at old photographs of a little girl who had wanted to be a starship captain. On the last day of the 10th year, she gathered her senior officers on the bridge of humanity's new flagship, the Nemesis. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen. It was the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. "Tomorrow," Vasquez said, "we begin." Her officers nodded. They had waited 10 years for this moment. "The Empire believes we are dead," she continued. "They have forgotten us. They have moved on. That is their mistake. They will learn that humanity never forgets. Humanity never forgives." Thereby scene quote. "Thank you 7-1. They will not Godman Saitu. They will mint as resurrence." She looked out through the viewport at the stars, millions of points of light, each one a possible target. "We cannot save the 7 billion who died," she said quietly, "but we can avenge them. And we will. Every Valorian who helped burn our world, every commander who gave orders, every soldier who followed them, every citizen who celebrated, they will all learn the price of what they did." Her voice hardened. "Operation Extinction begins at midnight. By the time the Empire realizes what is happening, it will be too late. We will strike from the shadows. We will show no mercy. We will give no quarter. And when we are finished, the Valorian Empire will be nothing but ash and memory." She paused. For Earth, every officer on the bridge responded as one voice. For Earth, far away, on the edge of Valorian space, a small outpost called Kethmar received routine supply shipments and reported nothing unusual. Its commander was bored. Nothing interesting ever happened on the frontier. That would change very soon. The outpost at Kethmar stopped responding on a quiet Tuesday morning. Commander Vethkal, the regional overseer, noticed the silence during his routine check of frontier positions. He sent a query. No response. He sent another. Still nothing. He assumed it was a technical problem, old equipment failing on a distant rock. He ordered a repair ship to investigate. The repair ship never returned. Commander Vethkal began to worry. He sent a military patrol, 3 small warships with experienced crews. They jumped to Kethmar with weapons ready and sensors active. They found nothing. The outpost was gone. Not destroyed, gone. The buildings had been vaporized, leaving only smooth glass where they had stood. The patrol searched for survivors. There were none. No bodies. No wreckage. No sign of what had happened. Then they noticed the message. Someone had burned a word into the planet's surface. Letters so large they could be seen from orbit. The word was in the Valorian language. It said simply, "Remember." The patrol commander reported back immediately, his voice shaking. Commander Vethkal escalated the report to Sector Command. Sector Command escalated to Regional Command. Regional Command escalated to the Imperial Council. No one knew what it meant. No one knew who had done it. Then another outpost went silent. Then a supply station. Then a communication relay. Within weeks, reports flooded in from across the frontier. Valorian positions were being attacked by invisible enemies. Ships vanished without distress calls. Colonies went dark without warning. And everywhere, the attackers left the same message. The Empire scrambled to understand. Their intelligence services worked overtime. Their military went on high alert. But they could find nothing. No trace of the attackers. No energy signatures. No survivors to interrogate. Then, slowly, the truth began to emerge. A captured communication drone. A single surviving security camera that had somehow kept recording. A dying officer who managed to speak one word before expiring. Humans. The Valorian High Command refused to believe it. Humans were extinct. They had been corrected. This was impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. On the Imperial throne world, Emperor Kethvorin the Eternal called an emergency meeting of his inner circle. Grand Admiral Sirthax attended, his face pale with confusion and the first hints of fear. "How is this possible?" the Emperor demanded. "You assured me the humans were eliminated." Sirthax spread his hands helplessly. "They were, Majesty. I destroyed their homeworld myself. 7 billion dead. The species was finished. Then explain these attacks." "I cannot, Majesty. Perhaps a few survivors on their outer colonies. A few survivors do not destroy military outposts," the Emperor interrupted coldly. "A few survivors do not carve messages into planets. A few survivors do not make entire patrol fleets disappear." End quote. "Levers another way." End quote. End quote. He leaned forward on his throne. "Find them. Destroy them. And this time, make sure they are actually dead." Grand Admiral Sirthax assembled the legendary Crimson Armada, 100 of the Empire's finest capital ships, crewed by veterans and armed with the most powerful weapons available. He would lead them personally. He would finish what he had started. The Crimson Armada tracked a human raider group to an empty system on the frontier. Intelligence suggested a small enemy base hidden among the asteroids. Sirthax ordered his fleet to attack formation. 100 massive warships moved into the system, ready to crush whatever resistance they found. They found nothing. The system was empty. No asteroids, no base, nothing but open space. Sirthax realized the truth a moment before the trap closed. The human fleet appeared without warning. Ships materialized from nowhere, no flash of FTL engines, no energy signatures, nothing. One moment, the Valorians were alone. The next moment they were surrounded by vessels that should not exist. At the center of the human formation floated the Nemesis, Admiral Vasquez, standing on its bridge. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez, of the Human Remnant." She broadcast on all frequencies. "Your species burned our world and killed 7 billion of our people. Today, we begin collecting what you owe." Grand Admiral Sirthax ordered his fleet to fire. Valorian weapons lit up the void missiles, energy beams, plasma cannons. The most powerful weapons in the known galaxy. They did nothing. Human shields absorbed the attacks like water absorbing rain. And then, humanity fired back. The Battle of the Void lasted 4 hours. In those 4 hours, the most powerful fleet in the Valorian Empire was systematically annihilated. Human weapons tore through Valorian armor, as if it were paper. Ghost ships appeared from nowhere, unleashed devastation, and vanished before counterattacks could be launched. Prometheus warheads turned Valorian capital ships into brief, bright stars. 100 Valorian vessels were destroyed. Humanity lost 3 fighters. Grand Admiral Sirthax watched from his flagship as his fleet died around him. He could not understand what was happening. These weapons were impossible. This technology was impossible. Humanity had been a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel. How had they become this? His flagship was the last to fall. Human Marines boarded it, fighting through the corridors with brutal efficiency. Sirthax was captured alive on Admiral Vasquez's specific orders. But a single Valorian escape pod was allowed to flee. Inside was a junior officer, chosen because he was young and would remember what he saw. A message was recorded in his pod's computer, set to broadcast the moment he reached Valorian space. The message showed Admiral Vasquez standing on the bridge of the Nemesis, surrounded by floating debris that had once been the Crimson Armada. "We are the last thought you will have before the end," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "We are humanity, and we remember Earth. We remember every city you burned. We remember every child you killed. We remember every scream that went unheard." She stepped forward, and her eyes filled the screen. "You cannot stop us. You cannot find us. You cannot negotiate with us. There will be no surrender. There will be no peace. There will only be consequences." She smiled. "We are coming." The message ended. On the Valorian throne world, Emperor Kethvorin the Eternal watched the recording in silence. Around him, His advisors argued and panicked and proposed plans. He heard none of it. For the first time in his 3-century reign, the Emperor felt something he had never known: fear. He looked at the frozen image of Admiral Vasquez's face, the face of a species he had ordered destroyed, a species that had refused to die, a species that was now teaching the galaxy what happened when you underestimated humanity. "Call the entire military," he said quietly. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource we have." "Majesty?" The Emperor's hands were trembling. "We are at war. The Galactic Empire killed 7 billion humans. Earth launched Operation Extinction. Number. Part 4. The Reckoning. The Valorian Empire mobilized for total war. It was the largest military action in galactic history. 20,000 warships were pulled from every corner of the Empire. 100 billion soldiers were armed and deployed. Every shipyard worked around the clock. Every factory produced weapons. The full might of a civilization that had crushed countless species was brought to bear against a single enemy. It was not enough. The humans did not fight like any enemy the Valorians had ever faced. They did not conquer worlds. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply destroyed. Valorian military installations vanished in flashes of artificial sunlight. Shipyards were reduced to melted slag. Command centers were found empty. Their entire staffs killed in their sleep by methods no one could explain. The human fleet struck without warning and disappeared without trace, leaving only death behind. And the Empire began to crumble from within. For 10 years, human infiltrators had moved among the Valorian client species, the conquered races who had served as slaves and servants for millennia. They had whispered rebellion into willing ears. They had promised freedom. They had shown that the Valorians could be hurt. Now those seeds bloomed into fire. On 100 worlds, the client species rose up. Factories were sabotaged. Supply lines were cut. Valorian governors were assassinated in their own offices. The Empire, which had seemed invincible for 12,000 years, suddenly found itself fighting on 2 fronts against an external enemy it could not catch, and an internal rebellion it could not crush. Admiral Vasquez watched the Empire burn from the bridge of the Nemesis. She felt no joy. She felt no satisfaction. She felt only a cold, endless emptiness that nothing could fill. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Valorian High Council. They're requesting a ceasefire." Vasquez turned slowly. "Put it through." The image of a Valorian dignitary appeared on the screen. He was old, his gray skin wrinkled, his black eyes filled with exhaustion. "Admiral Vasquez," he said, "I am Chancellor Vornath. I speak for the High Council. We wish to discuss peace." "Peace," Vasquez repeated. Her voice was flat. "Yes. The Council recognizes that the correction of your species was perhaps overly harsh. We are prepared to offer compensation, reparations, territory, whatever you require to end this conflict. Continue." The Chancellor's eyes lit with hope. "We will establish war crime tribunals. Those responsible for the attack on your homeworld will be tried and punished. We will grant independence to all client species. We will sign treaties guaranteeing human sovereignty forever. We will give you everything you ask for." Vasquez listened in silence. Around her, the bridge crew watched their commander with careful eyes. "Everything we ask for," she said, slowly. "Yes. Everything. Please, Admiral. This war has gone on long enough. Both sides have suffered. It is time to end it." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was broadcast not just to the Chancellor, but to every receiver in the galaxy, every Valorian world, every client species, every ship and station and outpost. "Chancellor Vornath, you offer us reparations. You offer us trials. You offer us territory and treaties and promises." She stepped forward. 7 billion. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a dying world. You killed 7 billion of us. You burned our cities while families ate dinner. You vaporized schools full of children. You erased everything we had built, over 10,000 years of civilization. And you did it because we dared to say no to you. She shook her head slowly. There is no reparation for that. There is no treaty. There is no negotiation. There is only extinction. The Chancellor's face went pale. Admiral, please. We don't want peace, Vasquez interrupted. We want you to understand what you did. We want every Valorian who ever lived to know the fear that 7 billion humans felt as fire fell from the sky. We want your civilization to end the same way ours almost did. She cut the transmission. The war continued. Human scientists unveiled the Lazarus Protocol, the weapon that even Admiral Vasquez had not fully understood. It was a device that could collapse a star into an artificial black hole. The technology required a genius understanding of physics and engineering that should have taken centuries to develop. Human scientists had done it in 10 years. The first Valorian core world to fall was Kethmar Prime, a planet of 12 billion people and the economic heart of the Outer Territories. A human ship appeared in the system, launched a single missile into the sun, and vanished. 2 hours later, the sun went dark. The people of Kethmar Prime looked up at a sky that was suddenly black. They had minutes to understand what was happening before gravity shifted and their world began to tear itself apart. 12 billion Valorians died as their planet fell into the newborn black hole that had been their sun. More core worlds followed. One by one, the suns of the Valorian Empire went dark. Systems that had existed for billions of years became tombs. Their planets crushed into nothing. Their populations erased from existence. The galaxy watched in horror. This was not war. This was annihilation. This was a species returning the lesson it had been taught. You showed us extinction. Now we show you. Grand Admiral Sirthax, the architect of Earth's destruction, had been a prisoner for 2 years. He was kept alive deliberately, held in a small cell on the Nemesis, allowed to watch as his empire died around him. One day, Admiral Vasquez came to his cell. Sirthax looked up at her. He had aged badly in captivity. His gray skin was pale and thin. His black eyes were dull. Why? He asked. His voice was hoarse from disuse. You have won. The Empire is broken. You could have peace. You could stop the killing. Why do you continue? 1. Vasquez sat down across from him. She looked old, too old and tired and hollow. My daughter was 7 years old, she said quietly. Her name was Maria. She wanted to be a starship captain. She had a stuffed bear that she slept with every night. She was afraid of thunderstorms. She pulled out a small photograph, faded and worn from years of handling. She died in Mumbai. When your ships burned the sky, she was at her grandmother's house. For summer vacation, she was at her grandmother's. She died in Mumbai. She was at her grandmother's house. For summer vacation. Vasquez looked at Sirthax with eyes that held no hatred. Hatred was too small a word for what she felt. You don't get peace, she said. You don't get negotiation. You get to watch your entire species follow my daughter into the dark. She stood up. And when the last Valorian sun goes dark, maybe, I will feel something again. Maybe the silence in my chest will finally be filled with something other than ash. She walked to the door. Or maybe it won't. It doesn't really matter anymore. What matters is that you will watch it happen. Every death, every dark sun, every dying world. You will see it all. The door closed behind her. Sirthax sat alone in his cell, listening to the distant sounds of the ship around him, the ship that was carrying the death of his species through the stars. And for the first time in his long life, he understood what he had done. Number. The Galactic Empire. Killed 7 billion humans. Earth launched Operation Extinction. Number. Part 5. Humanity Ascendant. The Valorian homeworld was the last to fall. Emperor Kethvoran the Eternal stood on the balcony of his palace, watching the sky. For 300 years, he had ruled the galaxy from this world. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had commanded the destruction of countless species. Now his sun was dying. It had started an hour ago, a slight dimming that most people did not notice. But the Emperor knew what it meant. He had watched 100 of his worlds die the same way. He knew the human ships were out there somewhere, invisible and patient, watching their final weapon do its work. He activated the emergency broadcast system, the last message that would ever be sent from the Valorian throne world. This is Emperor Keth Vorin, speaking to whatever remains of my people, and to the humans who are listening. His voice was steady. He would not show fear at the end. I wish to make a final plea, not for myself, but for the innocent. There are children on this world. There are people who had nothing to do with the attack on Earth. They do not deserve to die. He paused, looking up at the darkening sky. I understand now. I understand what we did to you, and why you have done this to us. I cannot ask for forgiveness. I can only ask for mercy. Please, let the innocents go. Let someone survive, to remember what we were. The broadcast ended. The Emperor waited. The sky continued to darken. Far away, on the bridge of the Nemesis, Admiral Vasquez listened to the Emperor's plea. Her officers looked at her, waiting for a response. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she shook her head. When our children burned, she said quietly, did they show mercy? Did they show mercy? Did they show mercy? She turned away from the screen. The Valorian sun collapsed into a black hole that night. The throne world, and everyone on it, every palace, every city, every person was pulled into the hungry dark. The Valorian Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, ceased to exist. Humanity had won. The galaxy was silent for a long time afterward. The other spacefaring species, those who had watched from the sidelines, too afraid or too wise to interfere, did not know what to expect. They had seen humanity destroy the most powerful civilization in known space. They had watched a species that had been declared extinct rise from the ashes and bring fire to its enemies. They were terrified. The liberated client species were the first to reach out. Ambassadors from a dozen worlds came to the human colonies, offering friendship and alliance. They had been slaves under the Empire. Now, they were free. And they owed that freedom to humanity. Lead us, they said. Create something better than what came before. The new human government rebuilt from the survivors of the old, led by President Yuki Tanaka, faced a choice. They could retreat. They could hide in their colonies and let the galaxy sort itself out. They could become isolationists, forever nursing their wounds and their hatred. Or they could become something new. President Tanaka was young, born on Mars after the burning of Earth, raised on stories of a homeworld she had never seen. She had spent her childhood learning to hate the Valorians. She had spent her teenage years training for war. She had never known a life without grief and rage. But she had also seen what that grief and rage had done. She had watched Admiral Vasquez become something less than human. She had seen the light go out of soldiers' eyes as they killed and killed and killed. She had heard the silence that fell over human society when there was finally no more enemy to destroy. Revenge, she realized, was not victory. Revenge was a fire that consumed everything, including the people who lit it. She gave her speech to the galaxy from the deck of a new human station, built in orbit around Earth's moon. Behind her, visible through the viewport, hung the ruins of humanity's homeworld still glowing faintly, even 13 years later. We did not want this war, she said. We did not start this cycle of violence, but we ended it. And now, we must decide what comes next. She looked into the camera, and through it, at every species watching across 1,000 worlds. Let this be the lesson written in stars. Humanity will never be prey. We will never be victims. We will never be slaves. Harm us, and we will burn your civilization to ash and salt the ground where it stood. Her voice softened. "But leave us in peace, and we will be your greatest allies, your truest friends, your most steadfast protectors. We know what it means to be weak. We know what it means to be helpless. We know what it means to lose everything. And because we know these things, we will stand with those who face the darkness." She took a breath. "The choice is yours." The galaxy chose wisely. In the years that followed, humanity became something it had never been before, a leader among species. The old client races joined a new coalition, with humans at its center. Not as masters and servants, but as equals, working together. They built something better than the Empire had ever been. A memorial was constructed in orbit around Earth's moon. It was massive, a great ring of crystal and light that listed every name of every human who had died in the bombardment. 7 billion names. It took 3 years to complete. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it, to read the names, to understand what had been lost. Admiral Elena Vasquez did not attend the memorial's opening ceremony. She had retired to a small colony on Titan, far from the crowds and the cameras and the history she had made. She spent her days in a small garden, growing flowers from seeds that had been preserved from Earth. On quiet nights, she sat among those flowers and spoke to her daughter. "I did what I thought was right," she would say. "I made them pay for what they did to you. To all of us. I brought fire to their worlds, and darkness to their skies." She would be quiet then, looking up at the stars. "But sometimes I wonder if I went too far. If somewhere along the way, I became what they were, a monster who kills without mercy, a weapon that cannot stop itself." She never found an answer. She was not sure there was one. A century passed. On a human colony world, in a school for children of all species, a young Valorian orphan raised her hand. She was one of the few survivors of her species hidden among the client races when she was just an infant, too young to remember the war. "Teacher," she asked, "why didn't the humans kill all of us? They could have. They had the weapons. Why did they let some Valorians live?" The teacher was an old human woman, with sad eyes and gentle hands. She had lost her family on Earth. She had fought in the war. She had seen things that still visited her, in nightmares. She thought about the question for a long moment. "Because," she finally said, "if they had killed every last Valorian, they would have become what the Valorians were. They would have become the thing they hated most. And 7 billion people died so that humanity would never become that thing." The orphan thought about this. "Have humans forgiven us?" she asked. The teacher was quiet for a long time. Through the window, she could see the stars, the same stars that humanity had once reached for with hope, before they learned how cruel the universe could be. "No," she admitted finally. "No. I don't think we have forgiven. I don't think we ever will. What was done to us was too terrible for forgiveness." She looked at the young Valorian with eyes that held both sorrow and something like hope. "But we are learning to live with the weight of what happened, and with what we did in return. We are learning to move forward without forgetting. We are learning to build instead of destroy." She reached out and touched the child's shoulder. "That's not forgiveness," she said, "but it might be something like healing. It might be a beginning." The child nodded slowly. Outside the window, in the cold vastness of space, Earth hung, broken and dark, a monument to what had been lost. But around it, human ships moved, and worked, and built. And in the garden on Titan, an old woman sat among flowers that had survived the death of a world. Humanity endured. It was not the ending anyone had wanted, but it was an ending. And perhaps, in time, it would become a beginning.